Good afternoon to everybody. Just before I start, a couple of things. First of all, congratulations to TSKB, to its CEO, Murad Bey, to the staff, to the members of the board for the organization of a day that is not only about development, it's about sustainable development. It's, as Murad was saying, this is not just about doing well, it's ensuring that our children and grandchildren are going to be able to benefit from what we do. And in the past, we have done quite a lot of damage out there. So I think that the first is congratulations. The second, thank you very much for the opportunity and for the invitation to have the World Bank talking about sustainable development in Turkey in this session. When I was preparing this morning the talk, I thought that perhaps the best would be to share with you a few reflections about what the World Bank, together with the government of Turkey and with some partners as TSKB, and Murad Bey was giving you a few examples of things that we are doing together, are doing to accelerate development and to ensure that this development is sustainable. And I think that the best for that would be to also go through the strategy that the government of Turkey had agreed with the World Bank for the next 3 years, and where perhaps some of you have seen references in the newspapers about the $18 billion that we are going to be bringing to Turkey, which will be on top of the $17 billion that we are already implementing. But in this particular case, what I want is to enter into more details about what are the pillars of this strategy that are underpinning this $18 billion and what we are doing. And what we have is 3 pillars. The first one is growth. Let's be clear. Development without growth doesn't exist. We have to have wealth. The first, that is going to be critical, and we need to be very clear on that. The second, my recognition, also Murad Bey, the social dimension, inclusion. We need to ensure that growth is not only for a group, that growth reaches all the corners in society. And the third part is something that we have been hearing, is sustainability. We want, to a large extent, that this is green growth, that we address global climate change, and so on. So what I will go is reviewing what we are doing in each of these 3 different pillars. Let me start with the growth part. When we look at Turkey and we look at the track record of the country in terms of growth over the past 20 years, is nothing short of outstanding. Growth in Turkey over the past 20 years, over the first 2 decades of the century, averaged 5.4%. At this rate, GDP in real terms quadrupled over a 26-year period. So we are talking about a generation, more or less. At this growth rate, we would multiply real GDP by 4 in a generation. This is really something that is there, needs to be recognized, and needs to be taken with pride as Turkish people that you are. Now, probably what we all agree is that taking into account where we are, looking ahead, what we want is that this track record over the past 20 years continues over the next 20 years, and if we can do even better, the best. This should be what we have to do. 2 considerations that we need to take into account. The first one is that I think we need to be patient and we need to be perseverant in the fight against inflation. And I'm not saying this out of orthodoxy. When you have high inflation, and we saw the numbers yesterday that came out that were not very positive, but when we have high inflation, it's very difficult to have investment going to the more productive sectors. There's too much noise. We don't know what is the best sector, where we are going to get the best returns. Many times, investment will go to sectors where we are going to be able to protect the investment, which is fair. I'm not saying that it's not fair. But what we want in an economy that has to grow is that investment goes to sectors that will make the economy efficient. This is critical. This is something that needs to be done. And this is, I know, this is a short-term issue. I'm pretty sure that in a matter of a couple of years, 3 years, we will not be talking about inflation. But I think it's important that we all have clarity on the need to be perseverant and to be patient on that, because this is something that is a challenge. The second aspect, looking also at growth, this is more on the longer term horizon, but still related to what I was saying is productivity. When you are competing in global markets, basically what you want is that with the same inputs, with the same labor, and with the same capital, that you produce more, and if possible, that you can produce cheaper than your competitors. This is what is going to make you more productive, what is going to put you in a better situation. And when we look at the evolution of factor productivity in Turkey over the past decade or so, what we see is that factor productivity growth has been declining. We could be discussing now what to do to become more productive. We could have a long discussion. I don't know how many economies we have there, but if you put a few economies on a table, it would be a long discussion. Just one idea that I think is working in many countries is the energy transition strategy. Until recently, in many countries, they were talking about growth on the one hand, or climate change considerations on the other hand. Growth or climate change. This is not that anymore. It's not either or. You can do both things. You can be talk about growth, and you can talk about energy transition. I was reading over the weekend a reference to my country. If somebody doesn't know, I come from Spain, and there was a reference to what is happening in energy markets. Spain developed over the past few years renewables, mainly solar and wind energies. And where we are now is that the price of electricity now in Spain is about 40% lower than in some of the countries in North Europe. It was quite funny that recently, during 3 hours in the morning, low peak, it was not peak hour, but during 3 hours in the morning, the price of electricity was 0 because there was excess supply. Then you come peak hour and it's different. But this is being helpful. This is not just that the prices of electricity are falling and this is good for consumers and for the private sector. What is happening is that there are no firms that are coming and investing because of that. You have data processing entities that need quite a lot of energy, and where the price of energy is going to be, the price of electricity is going to be particularly important, that are coming to Spain because of that. There are firms and industries on the car batteries production that also are following the similar track. This is critical, and what is important is that in Turkey, you are leaders in this area. Today, about more than 50%, I think it's 55% of the generation capacity. Generation capacity in Turkey today is about 105 gigawatts, but about half of that, a little bit more than half of that, is renewables. And what the government announced last year is that over the next 12 years, they are going to add 60 additional gigawatts of renewable energy to that mix. Once again, this is good. It's not only good for climate change, which it is, obviously. It's not only good for energy transition. You are going to depend on Turkey. You will not depend of coal that has to be imported, of oil. You are going to be basically dependent on your sun and your wind. And this is good as well, because this is going to contribute to improvements in productivity. And the improvement of productivity doesn't come only for lower prices in the energy, but it will come also for the possibility of developing industries associated to solar and associated to wind. This is critical, and this is something where we can go forward. We are doing quite a lot of things. Murad Bey was considering some of them. We are creating an equity fund, the very first one that is created by the World Bank, any country in the world. But what we are trying to do is, rather than using the fund to do lending, we want to use the fund to invest in equity in firms that are going to be changing the production engineering. We are also working with TSKB and other development banks to basically expand the use of rooftop solar panels. we want to contribute to the net zero. And it's not only about creating solar farms, it's also about creating and using the possibility of having rooftop panels that are much cheaper than a farm. We are also working with other institutions like Exim Bank to basically move a guarantee of $1 billion that will be supporting firms that are interested in adjusting to the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism of the European Union. In 2026, if you don't decarbonize production in key sectors, what is going to happen is that you have to face a tariff. This is equivalent to having a negative productivity shock. In all these cases, we are working, and if you realize, it's not just working with the public sector. What we are seeking is to bring the private sector, investing in equity, trying to provide financing so that the private sector is going to be able to adopt these technologies, and finding ways to provide long-term capital so that firms can adjust production to a new system where you are not going to be able to face the tariffs of CBAM. There are challenges, but there are also opportunities. And the beauty is that there are many things that are being done to address these challenges and to exploit the opportunities that we have in front of us. Let me move very quickly to talk a little bit about inclusion. I think that what we want is countries where there is cohesion. Dealing with important, difficult challenges requires cohesion, and countries where inequality is not very polarized, where you don't have lots of polarization, is easier to deal with the challenges. Over the past 10 years, inequality has increased in Turkey. Probably all of you know that. And there are a couple of things that I want to, a couple of considerations as well, as I was putting before. One of them is, once again, related to inflation. Inflation is the worst tax for the poor. The poor cannot hedge against inflation. It's impossible for them. They don't have ways to get out of that. So when I was telling you that we need to be patient and perseverant in the fight against inflation, it's not just for efficiency consideration. It's not just to ensure that the firms can put the money in the right place. It's to ensure that in society, every single group can protect, and particularly those at the lower part of the income distribution. This is critical. There is another element that is a little bit more complex and I think needs to be dealt with as well. Turkey is transforming very quickly. It was being said before. This is a country that is increasing per capita GDP dramatically. The country is changing. And one thing that happens when countries become richer is typically that the agricultural sector starts losing weight in the economy, whereas the industrial and the services sector start gaining space. That is normal. And somebody would say, big deal, Umberto. Why is this a problem? Well, the problem is that over the past 10 years, employment in Turkey increased by 15%. Employment in the agricultural sector declined by 9%. And the employments in the industrial and the services sector and employments in the agricultural sector are not the same. The skills that you need in the industrial and services are higher, and the skills typically in the agricultural sector are the lower. When you are setting jobs in agriculture, when you are increasing jobs in industry and in services, what you have is a premium on skills, the so-called skill premium. And this takes you to increases in inequality. The way to solve that is through education. And typically there is no quick solution for this. We have to invest in education. We have to talk about providing the skills to everybody in society, not only to be able to participate of the growth process, but also when we are talking about high productivity growth, perhaps associated to an energy transition, what we want to do there is that we have the labor, the capital, that are going to be able to participate in the growth process in a way that pushes the country ahead. Once again, I think that there are good news there. We are working with the Ministry of Finance and with the Ministry of Education, and what we are trying to do there is to have a conference this September to reflect about quality of education in Turkey. We want to see how we are going to be looking at university education, but also vocational schools, which is critical, and increasingly so. in these days. And we are also working with the central bank to prepare a conference for October where we are going to be talking about financial inclusion. Once again, ensuring that the opportunities are going to be reaching to all the corners of society, to all the segments of society. Again, there are challenges, but there are opportunities. And I think that the important thing is that we are already doing things to address the challenges and to exploit these opportunities. And finally, in a couple of minutes, when we are talking about sustainability and about climate change, I'm really convinced that this is the biggest challenge that we have today in terms of development. When we are thinking that the target for temperatures with respect to the increase of temperatures with respect to pre-industrial levels was 1.5 degrees. Last year we were at 1.48. It was not 1.5, but very close. But when you look at what implies this for Turkey, is that for central Turkey it's not going to be 1.5, it's going to be 2.5. And this means heat. This means challenges with fires. Last year was not that bad. A couple of years ago was one of the worst years in history in terms of forest fires. It looks at water scarcity. And agriculture, I was saying, is reducing its importance in overall GDP, but agriculture is still an important sector in the country. And if you start losing water access, this is going to be an issue. In all these three areas, we're doing quite a lot of things. Last week, we announced the launching of an operation where it's looking at forest fires. It's not only at the prevention, it's at the prevention and at the ability to fight in the case that you have to face a forest fire. We are working on irrigation. We will have an operation coming to our board in the next couple of months that is going to be looking at irrigation, because this is critical for the agricultural sector. We are working on water circularity, something that is extremely important because it's not only about irrigate, it's where are we getting the water from. Water circularity is going to be critical. And we are working with the Ministry of Environment also in retrofitting buildings, both public buildings and private buildings, to make them more energy efficient, but on top of that, to ensure that once you start putting your house there, you consider sustainability from another dimension, which is the earthquake dimension. Once you start working on greening a building, please focus also on what can you do to make the building resilient to also earthquakes. Again, challenges a lot, opportunity many, and we are working to address the challenges and to exploit the opportunities. I will leave it here, but I've been repeating a sentence a lot. Challenges, opportunities, what we are going to be doing. What I would like to ask you is that all of us, the public sector, the government, the private sector, the development banks, the international financial institutions, we all work together. And we all work together because we can address the challenges, we can exploit the opportunities, and we can have a better Turkey for Turkey, but above all for the people of Turkey. Thank you very much.